Welcome to class 6 of our Python programming basics. Today we are going to talk about function and modular code in Python. So our learning objectives. At the end of this class, students should understand the importance of functions in programming. Define and call user-defined function using the def keyword. Pass data to function using argument and receive output using return value. Understand variable scope, local versus global variable. Break down large code base into modular, reusable components. Build real-world programs like a calculator using function-based structure. So what are functions? A function is a reusable block of code designed to perform a specific task. Functions allow you to organize and structure your code better, reuse blocks of logic without writing them, make large programs easier to debug, maintain, and extend. Basic function structure. Function starts with a def keyword, followed by the function name and the parameters, followed by the block of code and a return value. So creating and calling function. Example, def, which is the keyword for declaring a function. Then the name of the function, greet. Then the code, which is print, welcome to Fixed Lab Academy. Then this is when you call a function. You call the name of the function with double bracket. Then this is going to be the output. Welcome to Fixed Lab Academy, because that was the code that was meant to execute once this function is called. Example 2, function with argument. We have a way of passing some argument into a function, and this can be done with including a variable name when declaring a function. Using the def keyword with the function name greeting underscore user, then you pass a variable name with a function with a code print hello, then the variable that we pass during when the function is called. This is how to call the function. You call the function, then you put in the name. The example 3 is returning a value. We still use our def keyword with the square, then x, which is the variable. Then we are going to return x multiplied by x. So we will store the result of this function in a variable. Then we print the variable, and the output is going to give us 25 if we are putting 5 as our argument. So function arguments and return value. We have positional argument, def multiply x and y, return x and y. Then print multiply 4 and 5, which is going to output 20. What is called positional argument is that this function does not basically take into consideration the value of x and y. So specifically, it only takes in the value you define when you are calling the function. Like this 4 is for x and this 5 is for y. So you can't just bring 4 and expect it to take 4 to y and take 5 to x. So that is why it's called positional argument. Then we have default parameters. Default parameters is when you use a keyword def, declare the function, then you give it a default parameter, a default value of a variable in case the user refuses to put in an argument or a value. Then the default one is going to be used. For example, this def greet, the name equals user, is going to print hello, the user that you use while declaring while calling the function. So for example, this greeting here, this greeting, which is a function, is going to output hello, then user. While this other greeting, which we have put in a value here as fet, is going to output hello fet. This is a default parameter. Then keyword argument. Keyword argument is also a function that has what? It has some arguments like name and age. Name and age. But when we are calling the function, we specifically tell the value to put in age and the value to put in name using this equals to. So no matter how we try to interchange this position of the argument, is going to still take in the particular value it was meant to take. Unlike the positional argument, which will only take in the value at the position at which it was declared. So we have variable scope in function. Scope determines where a variable is accessible in the code. So we have like a local variable declared inside a function and can only be used there. So for example, this name Alice is declared inside a function. So it cannot actually bring out this name and print it out as a variable. It's going to throw an error. That name is not defined. So no matter how you define a variable inside a function, it is not accessible outside that function. It's only usable within that function. But a global variable is used within and outside a function. For example, this count here is 0. But inside a function, we use this keyword global count. Then we increase the count variable by 1. When we are trying to print the count, you can see that the output has increased by 1. So using too many global variables can make debugging hard. So prefer passing value to function. Modular programming. Modular programming means breaking your program into independent reusable function or modules. What are the benefits? Easier to maintain, enhanced code reuse, simplify testing and debugging, encourage collaboration on large projects. So our hands-on lab is to write a function to perform some basic calculation. So for example, we are going to build a calculator to add, multiply, subtract, and just carry out basic arithmetic operation. So let's meet in our VS Code. Welcome to the practical demo of class 6. Here we talk about function in Python programming. So we talked about the syntax of function. We said if you want to define a function, you start it with a def keyword, then the name of the function. Let's say greet, then open and close parentheses. Then you give an indentation before you write the code. Let's say print welcome to Fix Lab Academy. Okay, so if you want to call a function, you just call the greet, the name of the function, with the parameter. Then you can print it. So you print this out. So if you want to call a function, you just call the greet with the double parenthesis. That's the name of the function with double parenthesis. Then the function is going to execute. Let's give it some time to connect to my kernel. You can see that you have executed this function. So there are times that your function will have a return value. Let's say dev greet, then we can return a string using the return keyword. We return welcome to Fix Lab Academy. Okay, so when we return that, we can now use a variable greeting equals to, then we call this function, and then we print greetings. So you can see that we can return a value, we can return a string, integer, or any data type in Python programming. So we have parameters and arguments. So there is how you can define a function and give it a parameter, so that when once someone is calling that function, it will give an argument. For maybe you have written a block of code that will make use of those arguments. So let's say, for example, let's take a positional argument. Let's say Dave greets, Dave greets, Dave greets. Then we use name. Then we return this. We return a string good evening name. Okay, so when we are calling this function, greet, we put in the argument. Let's say it's in a string like Daniel. Okay, so greetings equals to, then we print greetings. We print greetings. So you can see that the function actually return a good evening Daniel, because we have specified a parameter here which we put in an argument when we were calling that function. So apart from positional arguments, we have other arguments like keyword argument. So let's do this greet. So unlike positional argument that would take note of a position like this, let's just make this this is not great again. Calculate. Okay, so it's going to return x plus y. So we are calling this calculate. We now put in some value 5 and 7. Let's say we printed this out. So you can see that it takes the value of x to be 5 and takes the value of y to be 7, then add it together. So in keyword argument, the position does not really matter. Position does not really matter. So if the same calculate and then x and y, so we can say, okay, return x plus y, same thing. Here. Okay, so we call this function calculate, and then we use an equals. So we can say y equals to 7, and then x equals to 5. We can print this out. Print out that. So it doesn't matter the position that we give to y or x, as far as we have assigned it with an equals to sign. The value will be actually inputted into the parameter. So unlike the positional argument that will just take note of the position, if we change this position, it will just take note of the position and then input it into x and y. But the keyword argument actually does what? Assign a specific value to a specific variable based on what you define while you are calling a function. So we have another one, default arguments. Default arguments, you give it a default, you give it a default parameter, or you give it a default argument. Let's say user equals Daniel. So if we return this, welcome user. So if you print this out, it prints out this great. You can see that if we did not put in any parameter there, it's going to tell us welcome Daniel. But if we put in a parameter, let's say we put in another parameter like glory. So you can see that it actually changed. So default parameter will just give a default. It will just take in the default argument that is being specified and used to execute the code. But if that is not specified while you are calling the function, it just go back to what was given while declaring that function. So default parameter or default argument actually use the argument that was given while defining a parameter, while defining a function, if at all the argument is not given while calling that function. So we have other type of function like the arbitrary positional argument and arbitrary keyword argument. So those one, they accept more data, let's say in form of a list, let's say names, function names, and so we can see that this can return a lot of names. Let's say while calling the function name, we put in a lot of names like Daniel, put in Moses, put in Caleb. Okay, so we print this out. So you can see it returns a lot of values, a lot of argument that was specified while calling the function. So the keyword, the arbitrary keyword also return a value, but it return it as a key value paste. So this is quas, and then it return quas. Let's put it that way. So I'm calling, let's say profile. Let's say profile, then we print out profile name 1 equals to name 2 equals to name 3 equals to Caleb. So you can see it returns it as a key value pair. Name 1, Daniel. Name 2, Moses. Name 3, we have Caleb. So that is it for function. So we're going to build a simple calculator that will do some addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So this is the code that will do most of those jobs. You can see that this is our first function, add, which return what? Addition of two numbers. We take in a positional argument here, x and y. We also take a positional argument for subtract. Then we subtract, we return the value which is going to be an integer. We take in a multiply, which we take in two integer here as well, and then we multiply it, we return the same value, then we divide. We check also if this is divisible, because if when you're putting in a number, there's a number cannot be divided by a 0. So if it's going to be divided by 0, it will return this division by 0 error. To return error division by 0. So that is it for that. Then we use a while loop statement. We print the operation out. The operation are add to add, subtract to subtract, multiply, then divide or exit. You choose an input. So this is an input function that actually allowed a user to input something, which it will convert it to a lowercase, so that it can compare it with all these conditions. If a user put in exit, it will break the code. Else, it will just go in and then collect the user input. It will ask the user to input the first number. Then the user will input the first number and it will convert it to float. You ask the user to input the second number. The user will input the second number. It will convert it to float as well. We talked about this casting in Python. And then if the choice is add, it's going to do what? It's going to call the function add. It's going to print a result. This is a string, and it's to call the function add. Then put in these two numbers. You know, when we collected the number, we stored it in num1 as a variable. Then we store the second number in num2 as a variable. So it will add the two numbers. So the two numbers, num1, any number that will be put in there, and then num2, any number that will put in there. So same thing with the rest. Multiply, we'll do the same thing. We'll just multiply. It's just going to call each of these functions depending on what you have, the command you have put inside the code. So let's run the code. Enter a choice. So let's say we want to add first number, let's say 5, second number, let's say 5. Okay, so we should have 10 here. So you can see that operation add, which told us to input add, subtract, multiply, divide, or exit, and then it gives us our result 10.0 because we actually convert those values to float. So let's use multiply. Then 7 and 2. You can see that 7 times 2 is 14. Let's say subtract. This time 8 minus 8, which is, okay, let's say this time exit. So you can see that 8 minus 8 is what? Is actually 0.0. So that has taken us to the end of this course. If you actually need access to this program, to this code, you can actually drop a comment on the video. Then I will share the link directly to you where to get access to this code so that you can practice it with by yourself and maybe at your spare time. So thank you for attending the class up to this level, and I hope to see you in other series.